very late. There's a full moon outside, and I thought this would be the best time to read some urban myths. Did you hear that? What was that? I'm feeling a little creeped out. I'm so glad you're here with me. I'm gonna stop listening because I always hear things when I listen for them. I've got my light here from my phone. The book is called Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid. And it's by Brunvand. And it's a very extensive collection of urban myths. So let's read a few of these and hopefully not get too creeped out. These stories are pretty short, but we will read them together. Here's one called The Vanishing Hitchhiker. These boys went to a public dance. It was in a small town, and they knew most of the people there. They saw a very attractive girl in a white dress. So one of the boys asked her if she'd dance with him. As they danced, her hands were so cold, and he thought that she was ill. However, after the dance was over, they offered to take the girl home, and she consented. They got in the car, and she gave them her address. But when they got to Oak Ridge Cemetery, the girl said, "I forgot. I promised I'd get out here." The boys saw her go through a hedge, and she didn't come back. They then went to the cemetery and looked around and found nothing. They saw a man and a woman leaving, but couldn't find the girl. Worried, they went to the address that she had given them, and the people there said, "Are you sure she gave you this address?" They showed the boys some pictures, and the boys recognized the girl from the dance. "That's even the dress she was wearing," they said. Then the people told him that the girl was their daughter, and she had died 2 years ago. This happening preyed on one of the boys' minds that he went to the Engen Hospital for the insane and died 6 months later. and his wife were driving home from a party late in the evening. The road was dark and deserted. Suddenly, in the beam of the headlights, they saw a girl standing on the side of the road, a suitcase in one hand and her coat in the other. Being fearful for the girl's safety, on that dark, deserted road, they stopped the car and insisted that she ride with them. Without a word, she got in the car, and they rode on. Very few words were spoken. They rode in silence for about half an hour. The man, to break the silence, turned and asked her where she lived so he could take her home. But she had disappeared, leaving only the suitcase and the coat behind in the back seat. The man swore that he was doing 30 to 40 miles an hour, so she couldn't have jumped out. On the suitcase was an address. The couple went to this address and met an elderly woman of, say, 60 years of age. They explained what happened, and she told them that they were the 10th person to bring her a suitcase and a coat. And she showed them 9 other suitcases and coats of the same design from a closet. She told them the girl was her daughter, who had died a long time ago at the age of 16. The man's wife, being of a nervous disposition, was committed to an insane asylum, and he nearly went waggy himself. So what do you think of that one? Let's have a look, see what else there is. A teenage girl is babysitting for the first time in a large, expensive house. She puts the children to bed and has just sat down in front of the TV when the telephone rings. Judging by the voice, the caller is a man. He breathes heavily into the receiver, cackles menacingly, and asks, "Have you checked the children?" The babysitter hangs up, thinking her friends are playing a prank on her. But the man calls back and asks again, "Have you checked the children?" She quickly hangs up, but right away he calls a third time. This time saying, "I've already got the children, and now I'm going to get you." Now the babysitter is really alarmed. She calls the police and describes the threatening calls. They tell her that if he calls back, she should keep him on the line so that they can trace the call. Sure enough, a few minutes later, the man calls again. The babysitter pleads with him to leave her alone, thus detaining him, but finally he hangs up. Suddenly the phone rings again, and with every call the telephone bell seems to get louder and more insistent. But this time it's the police calling with an urgent command. Get out of the house right away. Those calls are coming from an upstairs telephone extension. Usually the urban myth ends there, leaving it to the listener to imagine what happens next. Sometimes it's said that when the police arrive and search the house, they find the children murdered and the killer lurking on the stairway with a knife. Well, that is really creepy, that one. Here's another one called The Hook. Once there was a couple, and they were dating, and they went out to the middle of the woods by a lake, parking, and there they were making out, and they had their radio on. There came a news flash on the radio to beware that on the outskirts of the town there was a man with a hook on his hand who had escaped from a prison. And to beware because if they saw anyone with a hook hand, he was dangerous. So they sat there for a while, and the girl started getting really scared. She looked over and she locked her door, and he locked his door, and he said, "This is really ridiculous, getting upset about it." And she said, "I'm kind of scared about this thing." So they sat there for a while, and she said, "Listen, let's go into town." And he said, "No, let us not worry about it. Don't worry about it." And she said, "Listen, I'm getting kind of scared. Well, let's go into town." So he goes, "Okay." So he takes her into town, and when they drive up to her house, he gets out and he goes over to the side of the door, and on the door was a hook. The boyfriend's death. A guy and his girlfriend are on their way to a party when their car starts to give them some trouble. At that time, they catch a news flash on the radio warning all people that in the area a lunatic killer has escaped from a local criminal asylum. The girl becomes very upset, and at that point, the car completely stalls on the highway. The boyfriend gets out and tinkers around with the engine, but cannot get the car to start again. He decides that he's going to have to walk up the road to a gas station and get a tow truck, but he wants his girlfriend to stay behind in the car. She is frightened and pleads with him to take her, but he says she'd be safe on the floor of the car, covered in a blanket, so that anyone passing would think it is an abandoned car and not to bother her. Besides, he can sprint along the road and get back more quickly than if she comes with him in her high-heeled shoes and evening dress. She finally agrees, and he tells her not to come out unless she hears his signal of 3 knocks on the window. He kisses her goodbye, tucks her under the cover, locks the door, and sprints off down the road. An hour or so later, it seems like years to the girl. Suddenly, she hears a knock and is about to get up when she remembers her boyfriend's warning of waiting for 3 knocks. She waits and hears 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and they continue. She remains motionless and it just continues. Finally, it stops, and she hears voices outside. She peeks out and the policemen are crowded around the car. They call for her to come out, that it's all right. She opens the door, comes out, and the police lead her to one of their cars, cautioning her not to look back. Despite this, she turns and sees her boyfriend hung from the limb of a tree above the car. His feet are barely touching the roof. That was the continuous knocking sound. So who killed the boyfriend? Who knows? The hairy-armed hitchhiker. This story takes place in 1978 in England, when the Yorkshire Ripper was at large. The story is of a young woman who was going one evening to a meeting in a hospital. The meeting is something to do with her work, and the hospital is somewhere out of town. She sets off driving along the dual carriageway, and it is very dark. She listens to the radio as she drives and hears yet another warning from the police that women should not be driving alone while the Yorkshire Ripper is still at large. The young woman sees an older woman walking along the road, and she stops, offering her a lift, which she gratefully accepts. The old woman gets in the car, and the two continue their journey. As the two women talk, the young woman notices that the older woman's hands are very hairy, more like a man's hands. In fact, she becomes so anxious that she works out a plan to get the older woman out of the car. She puts her car headlights on full beam so they are dazzling the other cars coming in the opposite direction. The other cars flash her in annoyance, and she points out to the older woman that there must be something wrong with her car since all the others are flashing her. So she asks the older woman to get out to look at the lights while she tries to adjust them. The older woman gets out of the car to check, and the young woman drives off, relieved to have finally got rid of her passenger. She goes to her meeting, thinking no more of the incident. But when she gets back in her car again, she notices that the old woman left her bag in it. She opens the bag to discover a hefty, blood-stained meat cleaver. That was creepy. Let's see if there's any more here. Okay, you ready? You're comfortable? There were these two girls and they were roommates, and they went to a university, a small school, and one night their school was having an all-school campus dance, and the two girls decided to go to the dance, and they thought they would meet some boys that way. So when they got to the dance, they were dancing and having a great time when one of the girls got she was afraid, she'd let them know that she'd heard them. It was back there, so she walked a little faster, and she wasn't going to turn back. So she started to run, and she ran all the way back to her dorm. But all the time she ran, you could still hear the heavy panting behind her. And so she ran in the dorm, and up the stairs, and down the hallway, and up to her room, and she still heard the panting behind her. So she got in her room and watched the doorknob as it started to turn. She got in her closet because it was the only place she knew where she could get in. And she heard the door of her room open, so while she was in the closet, there began this scraping on the outside of her closet door. Scrape, 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 like the sound of claws, and this heavy breathing and panting. And the girl screamed until a counsellor who was on duty heard her scream. And when the counsellor came upstairs, she found the girl's roommate outside the closet door with her throat slit. She'd been afraid her roommate would come in contact with a man from the insane asylum, and she'd followed her all the way back to the dorm and had had her own throat slit. Grandmother had gone out to spend Christmas with her cousins, who lived in the Far East. She had not seen them for several years and was very excited about the trip. They'd always been very kind to her, and each Christmas they used to send a present of a jar of special spices to go on the Christmas cake her daughter made. About 2 weeks before Christmas, a small airmail parcel arrived from the Far East. It had been posted on the 1st of December and contained what appeared to be the special spices for the Christmas cake. There was no note, nor surprisingly any Christmas card. Not wanting to delay any longer, the daughter got on with the baking and produced a magnificent cake for the Christmas festivities. It was the day after Boxing Day that a letter arrived from the cousins in the Far East. It was also dated the 1st of December, and it expressed how sorry they were to have to break the news of grandmother's death. The excitement had been far too much for her. They also wrote that because of all the arrangements that had to be made for the cremation, they could not have time to send over the special spices for the cake this year. However, they had airmailed grandmother's ashes home, and they should arrive shortly. Wow. It makes you wonder if some of these really did happen at some point. This was told by a friend who had heard it from a friend she was visiting in Arizona in 1992. This woman with a few friends had decided to visit Las Vegas for 3 days to do some gambling and generally imbibe some of the lively culture there. She checked into the Mirage Hotel and Casino and went up to their room to drop off their luggage. They noticed a peculiar smell in the room, as if maybe the trash hadn't been taken out, or the toilet had gone unflushed. Still, all seemed to be in order, so they left and did not return until late that evening. The smell had gotten noticeably worse over the course of the day, so they called housekeeping They vacuumed the room with a generous amount of carpet fresh, turned the vent on high, and bade the Arizona women good night. The stench was masked for the moment, but because they were all exhausted, they just went to bed. The woman who had told my friend's friend the story, as was her habit when in hotels, to put her wallet beneath her mattress when they all dabbed a bit of perfume on their upper lips and turned out the lights. They all slept until late morning, and when the sun came streaming in the room, making it uncomfortably warm, the stench was still there to haunt them, and it was now more potent than ever. Quite perturbed, one woman rang housekeeping once again to complain. She called the management office and complained more. A small army of management and cleaning personnel arrived shortly, and again they looked high and low, but to no avail. All agreed, however, that the stench was overpowering, so the manager offered to put the women into another room. They packed their things to move down the hall, but when the one woman reached beneath the mattress to retrieve her wallet, she seized upon something that felt suspiciously like a human hand. The mattress was pulled off the bed, and there, lying in a hollowed-out spot in the box springs, was a dead man. Evidently, the man had been murdered in that room, and the murderer had hidden the body beneath the mattress and the box spring. He could add enough of the box springs and the underside of the mattress so the body wouldn't make a suspicious lump in the bed. The Mirage Hotel management tried to calm the women by offering them 3 free nights in the hotel and about $1,500 of gambling credit in the casino to keep them quiet. What do you think of that one? Here's one. Now, I've heard this one myself when I was a kid, and I always was convinced it was true, but because this has been told elsewhere, I'm now a little bit dubious about it. But here we go. It's very short but sweet. When I was at school in 1962 to 1966, bouffant or beehive hairdos were all the rage amongst teenage girls. These arrangements featured hair piled high and getting held in place with copious coverings of tough hairspray. Getting the hair wet deflated the hairdo. So, the story goes that this lady with this elaborate beehive hairdo was held in place, and she sprayed it daily with fresh hairspray. She did not wash her hair for a month to keep that hairdo as high as possible. She started getting these weird sensations on her scalp, and someone saw a trickle of blood seeping out from under her hair. They quickly summoned the school nurse, and by the time the nurse arrived, the girl was dead. The coroner, in his post-mortem, broke open the beehive hairdo and discovered over 24 baby redback spiders living inside of it. A female redback had gotten into the beehive hairdo, had laid eggs deep inside of it. The eggs hatched, and the young spiders started eating the flesh of the girl's scalp. Now, I did hear that story. It happened to somebody in the 1960s in my town, and that is in England. And this obviously happened in America it's very unlikely this would happen twice. So I'm a little bit suspicious about that one now. It was the night before the senior prom, and one girl didn't have a dress to wear. She was poor and lived in the section of town where there were many immigrants from Haiti and other island countries in the Caribbean Sea. She'd gone to her neighbourhood funeral parlour the same day to pay her respects to an elderly neighbour who had died. Whilst there, she'd entered a room by mistake and had seen a young girl about her age and size lying in a casket. As she looked down on the casket, she noticed that the young girl's dress was very pretty and brand new. It had probably been bought just for the burial. When the funeral director came in and said it was time to close the casket, he sealed it with a big key, like a wrench, and said that the casket would remain closed from then until the burial the next morning. After the director left, the girl went down the hall to the room where her dead neighbour was laid out. When she was in the viewing room paying her respects, she heard a lot of crying and wailing down the hall. Somebody had collapsed with grief, and everyone, including the funeral director, ran down the hall to help the family. As the girl ran by the room with the sealed casket, she had an idea. She darted into the room, opened the sealed casket with a huge curved wrench, and quickly slid the white dress off the body in the casket. She put the key back in the socket of the casket lid and sealed the lid again. Stuffing the white dress in her school bag, she slipped out past the room where all the crying was coming from. The next night, she put on the dead girl's white dress and went to the dance. She danced with several boys that she knew, and her joints started to feel stiff. As time went by, her muscles began to stiffen, and she soon found herself walking and dancing awkwardly. She thought maybe something was wrong with the dress. She went to the girls' restroom and slipped into the stall. She took off the dress and searched it all over, but couldn't find anything wrong. So she put it back on. As she danced some more, she became colder and stiffer, until finally she was as stiff as a board. An ambulance was called and she was rushed into hospital, where the doctors pronounced her dead. But she was alive. She could hear every word that was being said and everything that was happening around her. She just couldn't move and couldn't speak. Soon, she was lying in the same funeral parlour where the girl in the white dress had been laid out, with her family and friends coming by and weeping. She tried to move and cry out, but she couldn't. The funeral director came and closed the lid on her casket. The next day, the casket was taken to the graveyard, and she could hear the gravediggers working. "Did you hear about what happened at the funeral home this morning?" one said. "No, what?" asked the other, as it threw shovelfuls of dirt into the hole covering the casket. The first gravedigger answered. The young mortician's assistant heard a knocking sound on one of the caskets. He opened it and a young girl in a slip climbed out. She said she'd been the victim of a voodoo ritual. Someone had given her a dress dusted with zombie powder, so she seemed dead, but she wasn't. "I wonder what happened to the dress," said the other. And then the girl in the casket couldn't hear anything else. One urban legend still haunts everybody from childhood, and it's the story of Bloody Mary. The version I know is if somebody went into the bathroom, shut off the light, and looked into the mirror and said Bloody Mary 3 times, a woman would appear in the mirror covered in blood. Now I can't remember for what reason, but she did either scratch your face or kill you. I know it sounds crazy, but in my childhood memories I actually remember a girl who was supposed to have done this and came out of the bathroom with scratches on her face. Now I have a vivid memory of telling my friend about Bloody Mary. During recess at school, a lot of girls would go to the bathroom. Their friends would wait outside because only one girl is allowed in at a time. One girl stands at the door to turn out the lights once you're positioned in front of the mirror. And once the lights are out, you close your eyes and turn around 3 times. Then you open them and stare straight into the mirror and chant, "Bloody Mary, show your fright this starry night." You have to chant slowly so she has time to come from the spirit world. And when you wait to see her face, and once you see her, you have to run out of the bathroom because where your friends are waiting, if you've sinned or done something evil in your life, then you will have 3 scratches on your cheek.